On a flight attendant handed me a drink quietly with a napkin hidden underneath the cold cup. On it, rushed handwriting, were the words warning me, "Move to the back. Leave your bag." I froze inside. Confused, I softly whispered, "Why?" She leaned closer, eyes focused, her stare sharp with urgency, and whispered back urgently, "Trust me." Seconds later, without any warning, the front cabin suddenly sealed shut completely. And that's when everything changed forever for me. Before I continue, please remember, make sure to subscribe to the channel now and tell me in comments where you're watching from today. I love hearing your stories too. I never expected that flight to turn into something terrifying. One of the scariest experiences of my entire life. It began just like any other ordinary trip. I was 26 then, heading to my cousin's wedding across the country excitedly with my Uncle David. We weren't seated together initially. It was a few rows ahead of me, while I ended up seated next to a young woman named Lena, clearly nervous. Was anxious about flying. The plane felt normal when we finally boarded. The low hum softly of the engines filled the air as people stuffed bags overhead, hurriedly into the bins above, and adjusted their seats. The attendants gave the usual safety instructions calmly, smiling as they pointed out the emergency exits. I leaned back quietly, thinking about the weekend ahead of me peacefully, while Uncle David turned around once to grin at me and say, "You'll be fine, Em. Just close your eyes and sleep through it." Lena, my seatmate, was fidgeting nervously and gripping the armrest tight, like it was the only thing keeping her grounded in that moment. She tried to laugh it off nervously. "I know it's silly, but I think every sound means something's wrong." "You fly often?" she asked. I smiled and told her it was normal, trying to calm her shaking nerves gently. Her chatter helped pass the time slowly as we climbed higher into the darkening night sky, leaving the glowing city lights far behind us. Everything about the flight seemed perfectly ordinary still. People relaxed into seats. Headphones went on quietly. Baby cried softly a few rows back, and the smell of coffee and reheated meals drifted through the cabin. I remember thinking how routine it all felt, almost boring and familiar, like 100 flights I'd been on before. I had no idea that within an hour, one small detail alone, a napkin with warning, would shatter that calm sense of normalcy entirely, and throw me into a moment where I had to decide whether to trust a stranger with my own life. About an hour into the flight, everything had settled into steady rhythm. People were reading quietly, watching movies on screens, or chatting in low voices around the cabin. The steady hum of the engines became background noise, almost comforting. Now, I leaned back again, sipping water slowly, when one of the attendants rolled by with cart. It was Marissa again, the same woman who had greeted me earlier. She wore a calm smile that reassured me, the kind that made you feel looked after. She asked softly again, "Something to drink?" Kindly, I asked for a soda without thinking. She nodded politely, reached for a can quickly, and poured it carefully into a clear plastic cup without spilling. She placed it gently on my tray table, with a napkin tucked underneath, then moved on without saying anything else. I almost didn't notice the napkin at first. It wasn't until I picked up the cup that I saw writing messy but clearly urgent, like it had been scribbled in a hurry. It read clearly, "Move to the back. Leave your bag starkly." For a second, I just stared at it, unsure if imagining things. My mind scrambled wildly for logical explanations. Was it a prank? A mistake somehow? My stomach tightened hard as I looked up toward Marissa ahead, who was helping another passenger a few rows ahead of me calmly. She must have felt my eyes on her because she glanced back. Her expression stayed calm, but she gave faint nod, confirming it was real and intentional. My pulse quickened fast. I leaned down slightly, pretending to adjust belt, and whispered as she passed again quietly, "Why?" She bent down close, her face near mine, and her voice stayed low, almost secretive. "Trust me." That was all she said before straightening up, smoothly and walking down the aisle as if nothing happened. I sat there, frozen, heart pounding loudly inside. The words on napkin burned deep into mind. Move to the back. Leave your bag. Trust me. Why would she say something like that? What was happening here? I looked ahead toward Uncle David sitting nearby. He was a few rows in front of me. He was flipping through a magazine casually, completely relaxed. If there was danger, he didn't seem to notice at all. For a moment, I thought about just leaning forward and telling him quietly, but something inside stopped me. If Marissa had taken the risk to warn me secretly like that, maybe it wasn't safe to draw any attention. Lena, my seatmate, noticed how pale I looked. She leaned in close, her voice slightly shaky. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Tonight, I slid the napkin slightly closer toward her carefully, avoiding making any kind scene. Her eyes widened instantly as she read the words silently. What does that mean? She whispered, her voice softly trembling. Why would she say that to you? I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely audible. But I think we should listen closely. Before she could respond, sudden movement at the front of the plane caught everyone's full attention. Two attendants hurriedly pulled the curtain divider closed across the aisle quickly there. That separated first class from the main cabin. The click of the locks echoed far louder than it should have. People looked up slowly from their glowing screens, murmuring softly in confusion. A man in business clothes frowned deeply, saying, "What's going on up there right now?" Marissa and another attendant stood firmly by the divider, their faces tense but carefully controlled. One of them said very quickly, "Please remain in your seats right now. Everything is fine here." But their stiff posture and hurried actions told a very different story. I felt a chill crawl up my spine slowly. The warning on the napkin wasn't random at all. Something was happening in the front area of the plane now. Something serious enough for them to seal it off completely. Lena grabbed my arm tightly. Do you think it's... She stopped herself suddenly, too afraid to finish the thought. Aloud, I knew what she really meant. The idea of something dangerous, even violent, suddenly felt real in a way I had never experienced before. I pressed the napkin flat against the tray, staring at the words again slowly. Leave your bag. That was the part that unsettled me. Why leave my bag? Was there something dangerous about staying near it? Or did she just mean not to waste time escaping? My phone, my wallet, everything important was packed inside it. But the thought of ignoring her warning made my chest tighten with pure dread. Passengers were beginning to whisper nervously. Woman a few rows up asked one of the attendants if she could go to the restroom, and the answer came back quickly. Not right now. Please remain seated right now. That only made people more restless than before. A baby started crying loudly as if sensing tension in the air around. I stole another glance at Uncle David quietly. He turned briefly then, noticing me looking at him. His eyebrows knit together like he was silently asking if I was all right there. I gave a small shake of my head gently, hoping he'd understand something was wrong somehow, but he only looked confused. The atmosphere in the cabin slowly shifted. What had been ordinary moments ago was now filled with growing unease everywhere. Every small sound suddenly, the click of a seatbelt nearby, the hiss of air from the vents seemed strangely amplified. My hands shook as I folded the napkin carefully and hid it under my thigh, terrified someone else might notice it. Marissa passed by once more, her face calm still, her voice polite as she asked if anyone needed anything else, but her eyes flicked to mine for just a split second only. It was the look of someone begging me silently to trust her without using words. That was when I finally knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. Something serious was unfolding at the front area of the plane. I didn't know what it was yet, but I did know one thing. If I ignored that warning now, I might not get another chance to make a choice at all. I sat frozen in my seat, staring at the napkin tucked under my tray as if it might somehow explain itself. My chest rose and fell quickly, every breath shallow. I could hear the hum of the engines, the soft chatter of passengers around me, The faint cry of a baby a few rows back, but all of it faded away behind the pounding in my ears. Move to the back. Leave your bag. The words kept circling inside my mind like an alarm I couldn't shut off. Lena leaned closer, whispering urgently, "What are you going to do now?" Her eyes darted nervously toward the divider at the front, where the attendants had sealed off the cabin. "This feels bad. Something is happening. I can tell." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, to pretend Marissa's warning was some strange mistake. Maybe she slipped me the wrong napkin somehow. Maybe she meant it for someone else entirely. But deep down inside, I knew that wasn't true at all. She had looked me straight in the eye. She had whispered softly, "Trust me." The problem was trusting her meant making a choice that didn't make sense. Leaving my bag behind wasn't small. My phone, my wallet, my ID, everything I needed was inside it. The idea of walking away from it felt impossible. And what about Uncle David? He was sitting just a few rows ahead, calm and completely unaware. Something dangerous was happening? How could I move without telling him first? I unbuckled my seat belt slowly, the click sounding louder than it should. My hands shook as I leaned into the aisle and whispered softly, "Uncle David." He turned slightly, giving me a questioning look. I held up the napkin, folded so only he could see it. His eyes narrowed as he mouthed, "What is that?" I wanted to tell him everything right then, but I froze when I saw Marissa walking back down the aisle. She caught my eye again, her expression firm now, almost pleading silently. A quick shake of her head told me not to share too much. My stomach twisted painfully. She didn't want me to involve him, or maybe she didn't want me to draw attention. Either way, I sank back into my seat, heart racing wildly. Uncle David frowned, clearly unsettled by my behavior, but he didn't press further. He just gave me a small wave as if to say, "Calm down, you're overthinking." But I wasn't overthinking. The energy in the cabin was shifting fast. I could feel it in the way the attendants moved, quicker and sharper, their voices polite but clipped. The sealed curtain at the front seemed heavier now, almost threatening, like it was hiding something I wasn't meant to see. Lena whispered again, her voice trembling. "Emily, we should move. Please, I don't like this." Her words tipped the balance inside me. I remembered something my grandfather used to say when I was younger. He'd been a firefighter, and whenever I asked him how he knew when to act, he would say, "When someone shouts, 'Move,' you don't argue, you move. Doubt is a luxury you can't afford in a storm." The memory hit me like a hand on my shoulder. Maybe this was my storm. I took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "Okay, we're going." Lena's face paled, but she nodded back, clutching her bag tightly. I glanced down at mine, tucked neatly under the seat. My heart ached at the thought of leaving it behind, but I slid it further under with my foot, forcing myself to obey the note. If Marissa said to leave it, there had to be a reason. I leaned down as if stretching my legs, then whispered to Lena softly, "Follow me. Don't stop." Asterisk slowly. I stood. My knees trembled badly as I stepped carefully into the narrow aisle. My movements felt strangely exaggerated, like everyone was watching closely. Though most passengers stayed distracted by glowing screens nearby, I walked quietly past Uncle David's row slowly. He looked up, confused, his voice low but firm. "Emily, where are you going?" I shook my head quickly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Please just stay there." His frown deepened, but before he could respond, Marissa appeared again, stepping calmly into the aisle behind me. She gave a subtle nod, guiding me toward the back carefully. Her presence was the only thing keeping me moving forward. Lena hurried behind me, clutching the armrests tightly of seats as we passed slowly. I could feel the weight of my uncle's stare burning into my back, but I didn't stop walking. Each step toward the rear of the plane felt like crossing a line I couldn't cross back from. When we reached the galley area at the back, Marissa motioned for us to sit in the last row quietly. Her voice was calm but firm as she leaned down. "Stay here. Don't ask questions. Just stay low." I wanted to demand answers, to ask what was happening, but the look in her eyes silenced me instantly. It wasn't fear that I saw there. It was urgency, focus, the kind of look someone wears when they're doing everything in their power to keep others safe. As I slid into the seat, my pulse racing, I realized the choice had been made already. I had left my bag, I had left my uncle behind, and I had no idea what I was walking into now. But deep down, I knew I had done the only thing I could do. And then, only moments later, muffled shouting came from the front of the plane, followed by the sound of something heavy slamming into the divider loudly. The passengers gasped, voices rising fast in alarm. My heart leaped into my throat as I gripped the armrest hard. I had trusted her completely. Now all I could do was wait to see what that trust would cost me. The muffled shouting from the front cabin cut through the low hum of the engines like thunder cracking. The divider rattled violently, and for a moment it felt like the whole plane held its breath. My pulse raced as I clutched the armrest tighter. Every muscle in my body went tense instantly. Lena sat stiff beside me, her hands locked tightly together, whispering again and again, "What's happening? What's happening?" Passengers shifted, uneasily now in their seats, whispering, glancing toward the sealed front repeatedly. A man in the middle row stood up suddenly and demanded loudly, "What's going on up there?" One of the attendants near the divider raised her voice, calm but firm. "Please remain seated. Everything is under control." But the edge in her tone betrayed her words. Nothing felt under control. Then came the unmistakable sound of a struggle. A deep, angry voice shouted from the front, followed by the thud of something hitting the floor hard. People gasped, some covering their mouths, others twisting in seats to see what little they could past the divider. My heart slammed against my chest as the reality sank in. This wasn't a drill. Something dangerous was happening on this flight, and I had almost been caught in the middle. The plane suddenly felt smaller, tighter around us. The air seemed heavier, filled with the weight of everyone's fear. The attendants in the main cabin exchanged quick glances, their faces pale but determined. Marissa, who had led me to the back, crouched near me. Her voice was steady but low, meant only for me and Lena. "Stay here. Do not move. Do not draw attention." I wanted badly to ask her what was really happening, but the words stuck tight in my throat. My hands shook hard as I gripped the seat in front of me, trying to steady myself. I thought about my bag still waiting under my seat near front, and panic rose sharply inside my chest. Had I left something dangerous behind there, or had I been the target all along? The thought made my stomach twist. The shouting grew louder. The divider shook violently, as if someone slammed against it repeatedly. A woman nearby began crying softly, whispering prayers low under her breath. The baby who had been fussing earlier now wailed uncontrollably, its cries filling the cabin with raw human terror. Then, over the intercom, the captain's voice came on. Its tone was calm but firm, carrying heavy authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Please remain seated and keep calm. For your safety, the front cabin has been secured. We'll be making an emergency landing shortly." The words "emergency landing" sent a ripple of panic through the passengers. People spoke louder now, some demanding answers, others frozen in fear. I felt Lena's hand clutch mine, her grip icy cold. "Emily," she whispered softly, her voice trembling badly. "What if we don't make it?" I squeezed her hand back tight, though I wasn't sure who I tried comforting, her or myself. "We will," I whispered back. "We have to." Just then, the divider finally swung open briefly as two attendants struggled with a man. He was tall, his face twisted with rage, and his arms flailed wildly as he shouted something I couldn't fully hear over the chaos. But I caught enough. "You don't understand. It has to be done." Gasps filled the cabin as passengers realized the threat was real. The attendants fought to restrain him, one gripping his arms while another shouted for restraints. I saw something glint in his hand before it was knocked away, small, metallic, but terrifying enough to send my heart plummeting fast. Uncle David stood from his row, his face pale with shock, his protective instinct overriding everything. "Emily!" he shouted loudly, trying to move toward me, but an attendant held out her arm firmly, blocking him. "Sir, sit down, please." The scene was chaos, fear and confusion pulsing through cabin like electricity. But even through the panic, I locked eyes with Marissa. She met my gaze with a steady look, a silent message. "This is why I told you to move." Finally, with help of another passenger who stepped in. The man was forced to the floor, his arms restrained behind back with zip ties. His shouts turned into muffled rage, his body thrashing until exhaustion took over. The attendants worked. Quickly, their professionalism unshaken despite terror around them. The cabin filled with nervous chatter as people tried making sense of what they had seen. Some cried quietly. Others demanded to know what the man had planned. The attendants gave no details, only repeating, "You are safe now. Please remain calm until we land," as the man lay restrained at front, breathing heavily. I realized how close I had come to being there when everything unfolded. If I hadn't listened to Marissa, if I had brushed off the napkin as nonsense, I would have been trapped right in the struggle. The fear slowly shifted into a wave of gratitude. Gratitude that she had seen me, chosen to warn me, and that I had trusted her when nothing made sense. The hum of the engines continued, steady as ever, but to me it sounded different. Now it sounded like survival. The minutes after the man was restrained felt unreal. The cabin that had once been filled with chatter and calm now buzzed with shock. Some passengers whispered quietly, trying to piece together what had happened. Others sat frozen, staring blankly at the floor or clutching loved ones' hands. The baby who had been crying earlier finally quieted as if sensing the shift in air. I stayed seated in the back row where Marissa had placed me. My heart still pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. Lena's hand never left mine. Her knuckles, white, her eyes still glistening with fear. I could see her chest rising and falling quickly as if she tried breathing away the terror inside. Up front, the man lay on the floor, restrained, his voice muffled under the hands of two attendants, holding him. Every now and then, he shouted fragments of angry, confusing words that didn't make much sense, but his fight drained. It didn't matter. The sight of him struggling earlier was enough to leave its mark on everyone aboard that plane. "The captain's voice came over the intercom again, steady but serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your cooperation. We will be landing shortly under air traffic guidance. Please remain seated until instructed. Your safety is our priority." The words, "your safety," echoed inside my head. Just an hour earlier, I had been sipping water calmly and thinking about wedding plans. Now I was sitting in the back of a plane, realizing how quickly life tilts without warning. I glanced forward and saw Uncle David still in his seat. His eyes found mine, filled with fear and something else. "Guilt," he mouthed. "Are you okay?" I gave a small nod, but it wasn't enough. When the plane finally landed and we were allowed to move, he rushed to Payback to reach me. He pulled me into a tight hug, his voice low and rough. "Should have listened. Should have gotten up when you looked at me like that." I shook my head. "You didn't know. None of us did." But the truth was, I hadn't even known if I should listen. If not for Marissa's warning, I might have ignored every instinct and stayed put. That thought alone made me shiver. As the plane touched down and slowed on the runway, everyone stayed quiet. There was no applause like you sometimes hear after a safe landing, just silence, heavy and tense. The cabin crew gave short instructions, telling us to remain calm until security came aboard. Within minutes, armed officers entered their boots. thudded down the aisle as they headed for the restrained man. Watching them take him away was surreal. He looked smaller now, weaker. His earlier rage reduced to muttered protests. The sight of him being let out in handcuffs made me feel both relief and sadness. Relief that it was over, sadness that something so dark had unfolded in a place meant to carry people safely. When we were finally allowed to leave, passengers moved slowly, still shaken. Some clutched their children. Others wiped tears from their faces. The usual rush to grab bags and hurry. Off the plane was gone. This time, people walked with quiet gratitude, each step heavier than normal. I lingered at the back, waiting for Lena so we could leave together. Before I stepped off, I turned to Marissa. She looked exhausted, her hair slightly out of place, but her calm expression never wavered. "Thank you," I said softly. My voice cracked a little. "You saved me." She gave a small, tired smile. "I just did my job. You listened, and that made all the difference." Those words stuck with me as I walked off the plane into the bright lights of the terminal. Uncle David stayed close to me, unusually quiet. It wasn't until later, when we sat in the waiting area while security debriefed passengers, that he finally spoke. "You trusted her," he said, "even when it didn't make sense." I didn't, and I'll never forget that. That night, lying in a hotel bed near the airport, I replayed the entire flight in my mind. The napkin, the whisper. The moment I chose to stand and walk away from my bag, even though everything in me wanted to hold on. I realized something important. Sometimes safety isn't about logic or convenience. Sometimes it's about listening when someone who sees the danger says, "Trust me." The lesson I carried with me from that flight was simple but powerful. Danger doesn't always come with warnings. You can understand. Sometimes survival depends on acting. Before you have all the answers, trusting the right person in a critical moment can change everything. The plane could have ended in chaos. Instead, I walked away with a story that will stay with me forever. And I will never board a flight again without remembering the quiet strength of one attendant who decided to protect me and the choice I made to believe her. If this story kept you hooked, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from.